All right, everybody, what is going wrong with Ferrari's design language? So the F80 was just revealed, and let's take a look back at how the design language kind of changed and why most people are not really vibing with it. This comment I found was kind of the one that summed it all up for me. You know, let's all be honest here, engineering-wise, it's a marvel, but it lacks the beauty and soul of its predecessors. And that is actually exactly how I feel about it. So let's go take a look. This car was revealed around 2010, I believe, or 2007, if I'm not wrong. This is the 430 Scuderia. I was about 10 at the time. And that's when I kind of really fell in love with Ferrari. I always watched with my Italian side of the family, the Formula One. Schumacher was on point and Ferrari was all the rage. And so when this car got revealed, the 430 and later the Scuderia, this was my dream car. I actually went to the Ferrari Museum in Maranello earlier this year, and I saw it in the flesh, and I've seen it before a couple of times, and it is still kind of like my dream, kind of old school car at this point. Now, the car that came before that, of course, this was around 2000, was the Ferrari 360. Of course, here is the more souped up Stradale version. And so these cars kind of look similar and share kind of the same design language. If you look at this, you have these two vents over here. They're the same over here. The two gaping holes in the front, the two gaping holes in the front. The lights here are a bit smaller, but they kind of share the same language. The door mirrors are kind of the same. You get the point. The language speaks. It's elegant and it's sporty. And then let's take a look back at the hypercar. So the F80 just revealed about a month ago, next to the F50, which to me, this was also a photo I've taken, by the way, in the Maranello Ferrari Museum. It's definitely worth going there. Yeah, you should do it if you're in the neighborhood. So the F50 and the F80 is kind of the one, the F50 is kind of the one that looks most similar to the F80 for me. You know, most design cues, I think, come from that. But let's actually take a look at a few things that are similar first. So you have the holes in the front, that's kind of the same. You have the low, kind of small-ish vent up in the front, that's kind of the same. You have this air hole right there, that's kind of the same over here as my hand is showing up. And of course you have the spoiler. Now, what is the big difference between these two? And I think what is the main gripe I have with the modern day Ferrari language? It's mainly that this just looks way too busy. There's too much going on for me. And this is like the modern hypercar kind of feel in general, but it's not the Ferrari kind of feel I've come accustomed to. And the one that I guess most people are expecting and liking at this point. So look at these body panels. They're, you have the giant black stripe going through, which is actually the same with the LaFerrari, which I'm going to show you in a second. That's not here anymore. That's gone. And then you have kind of the simple body panels. Now look at this front bumper. It's kind of one giant scooping field. It has, the black lines still going through it, some of the reflectors and some vents. But then you look at this. So you have a giant edge over here. You have a giant fend over here. This then curves over. The hood is all curved. I think it even has two air, what is that called? Where the air kind of flows through, similar to the LAF and the Pista, which we're also going to look at later. Then you have the vent that scoops back. You have the giant splitter that comes out. The lights are now horizontal. It's just way, way, way busier. Same with the back panel. Like, look at this. The door kind of goes over. It kind of flows into the back all the way through. You have this kind of, not really rear quarters panel because it's split in half. But, it all flows kind of easily and it looks pretty elegant. And then over here, this cuts into this like black fence / hole kind of thing. Here it comes up, which isn't too bad. Now it's one rear giant quarter panel. There are more vents in there. It scoops here. So this is just way busier. And if we now look at the previous generation, the LaFerrari, you see kind of the same thing. This the black stripe is not there, excuse me, but the design is just elegant. It's simple and it's elegant, whereas this is not elegant and it's busy. I'm sure this is better on the track or whatever, and it's faster and whatever. It's more expensive too, but this is the embodiment of a Ferrari to me and to most people. And this came out 10 years ago at this point, and I think people still hunger for this more. This is simple, elegant styling while embodying Ferrari. This, to me, is not. And this is another comment that I found that kind of speaks to me is this and the W1, which has also been revealed, make me appreciate the design of the LaFerrari and the P1 even more. It has the entire industry decided elegant design just isn't in anymore. That is kind of what I feel, and then the, of course, idea of less is more comes to mind. And I think in the case of these two, I think that I agree with that. I think I definitely agree with that. So let's take a look at the other cars, because this was only the F8, and I've got a bunch more for you. So here we have them all next to each other, right? The new sort of design language. And this was kind of introduced with the 296, and then later the 12 Cilindri, which is a terrible name, but then again, these giant V12 cruiser Ferraris kind of always had a little bit of a bad name, at least recently. And then, of course, here you have the F80. So all of these share some of the same design cues that the previous gens don't. So as you look at that, mainly, actually, it's in the headlights for me. Now all of them are small and horizontal. Here the same, not the smallest. Here as well, the 12 and the F80 are kind of like the same, more of the same than the 296, but still. If you then go up, these are the previous generations which kind of first introduced the design language that then went up, evolving throughout a couple of cars for about 10 to 15 years. So the 599 GTB and the 458 Italia. And here you can see the original kind of design. So let's start with this generation, and then we'll come back to these. So the 458, still iconic for most people, the most iconic V8 Ferrari ever made, because it's not turbocharged, of course. So the sound is there and the kind of heritage is there. And it's still an absolute stunner. I mean, personally, I really like the vents that are next to the headlights. But same as the LUF, you have these vertical headlights that kind of really make the car stand out. You have this very significant hump here in the back, and later this will get a vent, but the lines will stay mostly the same with the new generation, which of course was the 488. If you put these next to each other, see the lights basically the same, just evolved. Okay, sure, the hood has changed a little bit, but the mirrors basically exactly the same. You see this kink in the door is exactly the same. Of course, like I said, now there's a vent over here, but it's pretty much similar. This is an evolvement of this. And just a personal shout out to the Pista, which I think is probably the most beautiful Ferrari, in my opinion, at least of the modern design, and especially for the V8s. That's definitely my holy grail for sure. And then we go to the F8, which is an even more evolved design of the original 458, but you can still see it in there, right? You can still see it in there. The vertical headlights, okay, the hood, what is it called? Not an intake, but I guess an air exit or whatever. Let me know what that is actually called like. Which, of course, came from the Pisa. It's now in there. The same kink in the door is there. The same vent is there. The same mirrors are there. So, sure, you can like this or even this more than this. But at least you're not going to... If you think this is beautiful, you're not going to call this ugly, right? And then later we're going to talk about the backsides, which I think is, for me, the most, the most changed part. But let's go back to the giant V12s now. So the 12 Cilindri, literally meaning 12 cylinders. Before that, you have the 599 GTB and later, of course, the GTO and stuff like that, which kind of introduced the design language for these modern day V12s from Ferrari. And let's take a look at this, right? So you have this giant vent over here, which has become very significant. And something I personally really like about the 599 is this giant hole where the kind of body of the Ferrari goes through, but the window kind of kinks back. Personally, I really, really like that. And of course, these lights and this vent gets introduced, and this front end basically, which is pretty nicely, goes pretty nicely with the F12, which came later. As we can see, the door vent over here, it's moved down a little bit, become a little bit bigger, but it's still over there. This front end is, of course, evolved a little bit, but it's still there. The lights have become a little bit bigger, but it's still there. And again, shout out to the F12 TDF, which of this generation is personally my favorite. And then, of course, we get the 812 Superfast, and this is kind of where the names become a little bit ridiculous. The 812 is, again, a just complete evolvement of the F12. A bit more things have changed. They've made these little eyebrows similar, actually, to where it really reminds me of this and the 458. But the lights, again, vertical. The giant gaping hole in the front, kind of similar. It's, it's redesigned a little bit. This giant kink in the door has now evolved and kind of go upside down, but it's still in there. These vents are really reminiscent of this air hole in the 599. You can see it's an evolvement of it. And then if you go back to this one, all of those things are gone. Where is the kink in the door? Where is the continuation of the giant scoop? Why are the lights horizontal all of a sudden? Where is this hole in the back? Like, there is nothing there that reminds me. Well, nothing. I mean, of course, it's a giant bonnet with a V12 in it and then a black roof. But this doesn't remind me of this at all. And then we go to the backside, and let's start here first. So what do we see? We see the round headlights, the round exhaust pipes, and then you move over to the new design language, and something is just off. And don't get me wrong, the 296, or let's stay here. The 296 is an incredible car. It's incredibly fast. And actually something very, very interesting that I should make a video about if this one gets a bit of views is basically the price has plummeted on these cars on the secondhand market. You lose like 50 grand if you've driven it 1,000 miles or 1,000 kilometers. But that's a topic for another point. But this is so different. I hate the exhaust in the middle. I think it looks ridiculous. And while this is, again, just elegant, simple, this is just not. Actually, let me go to the video game characters that these remind me of. This really reminds me of Zero from Borderlands. Look at that. It's kind of like stealthy, but still approachable. It's like stealthy, but kind of with a nice character. That's what this reminds me of. Where this kind of just reminds me of Aiden of Watch Dogs. It's like, it's still stealthy and kind of, the idea was good, but the execution just isn't there. That's kind of what that makes me feel like. Whereas, truth be told, with the V12s, it is much closer. It is much closer. I still prefer this. The round headlights, iconic to me. I don't like why they changed that. But this is much closer. The only thing I don't like on the Dodici is this line that comes from the bonnet. I don't mind it, but I don't like when it goes through. Like, it looks like it is a guy who is like squishing his cheeks together, like this now looks too big, and this now looks like a puckered mouth a little bit. So personally, I'm not a fan of that, but truth be told, it's not the worst. What I also definitely prefer on this is that the kind of splitter comes up in the same body color. So you get this kind of shadow line, and I really like the approach of that. That is gone here. It's not the end of the world, because these like black areas where the exhausts are still kind of the same, which gives it that distinctive look. So I definitely like that. But now let's go up, because we haven't talked about one of the other cars that was called a hypercar, but now kind of isn't, because it kind of sits in between and everybody can buy it, but it's still 500,000, whereas this is like 3 million. So the SF90. Personally, this is probably the kind of bridge between the previous cars we've been talking about and the new design language. And still though, the SF90, actually it's a kind of a perfect bridge because it introduces the new design elements while still holding on to the previous ones. And what this reminds me of is, spoiler, one of the last scenes of the great television show that I've come to like, and that is called It'll Pass. And that is something that this car really reminds me of, because when it first came out, the SF90 wasn't necessarily an incredible stunner. People weren't super excited by it. I have seen this car in the flesh now multiple times, and it is actually an amazing car. And I've come to like it more. And I'm kind of thinking things will happen the same with both the Dodici and both the F80, although it'll probably take a lot of time, at least for me personally. Now, throughout this whole thing, we haven't talked about pricing and even interiors. So if this one does kind of well, if people like it, I'll jump on that. And there's much more to talk about other brands and the car industry as a whole. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. So I love to share my opinion. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll check in another time.